Yeah, as we bring up Lance, some of you may not know that he was Becky Peters' pastor growing up. So Becky's told me a lot about Lance and the innovative way they did ministry up there. You have to ask Lance about this. You get a chance to take him aside. But coffee shops and that you guys have your own coffee businesses and all kind of some campuses. They started some different places around Longview, Washington. Before it was in Longview, you're in Nevada?
Correct.
Nevada, and then like 12 years in Longview?
22.
22 years in Longview. And then now Lance is a pastor of pastors. So you guys have known for probably about the last 10 years, Fairfield Baptist has hosted pastor clusters meetings to do trainings and encouragement for the pastors in our area. And Lance, as of recently, last few years, has been that trainer who's come in and encouraged pastors, trained us in small groups and evangelism, and just basically encourages them how to best reach our communities for Christ. And so Lance brings a whole bunch of experience in some numerous places, but also just brings a heart and love for God, and a great, love his teaching style. And I'll let him talk about his family and things. I introduced that, his family's not here with him. He's coming down on his own. But also Lance has been through a lot recently. So we've been praying for him, and our staff's been praying for him. And he'll probably be sharing about that, I imagine, also. Just also give you a report, just Justin and Shannon Kahn, who are supposed to be here this weekend, they're feeling better, and they're on the way up, but they had some serious bouts of COVID. And then somebody asked about Kevin and Karen Salinas, and they are doing much better also, but they had some serious bouts with COVID. So probably continue to social distance as we're together. When we come here Sunday morning and join the other church, Sunday morning, we'll probably make sure I'll bring our masks with us. Some of you don't know, from last year, after we were here in August, that fall, Ron Allen, who's the pastor here, lost 3 different people from their congregation to COVID. So, something to be aware of, and to just remain vigilant, I would say. So I'm going to let Lance come up here and share with us tonight. I'm excited he's here. Let's just give him a welcome.
We'll see.
Do we need to turn this off, Ryan?
I'll cut it in. Hey, let me start out by saying I am so glad that you guys were here for my Billy Madison moment. You probably aren't sure exactly what it is I'm talking about, but Billy Madison, the movie, he starts out, he's a 27-year-old guy who's drunk and he's irresponsible and all these sort of things, and his dad owns all these hotels, and he wants to bequeath he wants to give Billy all of his hotels. Well, ultimately he looks at Billy and says, "Billy, you're irresponsible. I can't do this." He says, "What are you talking about? Man, I've done all these great things and this, and I finished school." He says, "Well, actually, Billy, I bribed all of your teachers to get you through school." And he says, "No way." He says, "Yeah." So Billy and his dad, they come up with this idea that what they're going to do is that Billy's going to go back, he's going to pass all 12 years. So he's going to take 2 weeks, or he's going to take each year, it's going to be 2 weeks, right? And there's this one place in the beginning, in his first grade, where he's sitting there and he takes a test, and he passes it with 100, and he looks at it, "Yeah, see what I did?" And that was kind of me there. Walking off the stage like I did something special. But I did. I love that. I'm halfway down here. Well, this is only worth 4 points, man. We were impressed. Okay, so I need some volunteers. I love this part, right? Actually, I hate this part. Because every time that I'm sitting in the congregation and I ask for, and someone's asking for volunteers, I look away. Anybody else do that too? You guys are looking at me. You're looking right at me. I love that. I love that. But I need some volunteers, because in the message, I'm going to give you the opportunity to read some passages of Scripture. Short passages. So anybody, raise your hand. Raise your hand. There we go. I like it. There's one for you. One for you. one for you. Oh my goodness, I'm not even at front row. Did I get
Well, I
you
have
the
to
two?
look it up.
There we go. Oh. All right, guys, so let me start out by telling you a little bit about myself. My name is Lance Caddel. I work with the Northwest Baptist Convention. I have been in this role for about 4 years. I think that, truthfully, Alan did a great job of kind of laying out what I do. So I'm going to skip a lot of that, and I'm just going to jump to the fact that I've been married to my lovely wife for 28 years. We have 5 kids, and the oldest is 27, the youngest is 19. We're down to 1 left in the house. Yeah, that's pretty exciting, and it's kind of a weird situation because I have a lot of people come to me and say, well, what are you going to do with the empty nest? And, you know, we've kind of turned that whole thing on its ear, and we have left him at home. Yeah, so like he's the one experiencing the empty nest. He goes out there looking for dinner, and we're gone. So we kind of feel like, hey, you're 19, you can take care of yourself, you can do this, right? So that's kind of where we've gone. And I want to say thank you so much for allowing me to come. I have known your pastor now for probably 15 years, somewhere in that. And then I'm getting to know Ryan, and I love working with you. You have just done a phenomenal job putting this stuff together and then communicating with me. Thank you so much. And then Becky Peters, I tell you what.
We want to hear it.
I've known Becky for a long time, and in so many ways, really, the reality is that she is a part of the family. So much so that the other day, I was preparing to go and speak at a church. And I knew one of the things I like to do when I go someplace to speak is because my wife can't always come, and the kids definitely aren't going to drag themselves to go listen to Dad speak every time that he's speaking. So I like to bring a picture. And I put the picture up and kind of let everybody know, so you kind of get a feel of, okay, so that's his family, right? So I'm talking to my oldest daughter, and I asked Jordan, I said, hey, Jordan, could you look up and try to find a more recent picture? Maybe one of those selfies, because we're kind of known for our selfies, you know, I go kind of jam into this little place, take a quick selfie and things like that. So she does. She's looking through, and she finds one, and she sends it to me. I look at it, and I'm about to hit send, and I look and I said, wait a second. Becky Peters is right in the middle of this thing. So there she is, right in the middle. But I sent it anyway. You know, we just added you to the family, and I just told her we have 6 kids. So that's right. Jackie Peters, Jackie Caddel. That's what we'll go with there. So I love what you guys are doing here. I'm going to be honest with you. In a day and time when it seems like so many churches are focusing on the Sunday morning experience. Right? It's all about trying to put on something. And I don't want to call it a show because the reality is that some of them aren't shows. I mean, some of them are genuine, right? It's genuine worship, genuine people gathering together. But everything is gathered for that Sunday morning. Everything is about that Sunday morning. And I love this. This is family. What you guys are building is something very special in 2021. It's not necessarily special in 1950 or 1960, but to be able to take it to the next step and to say, listen, we know that what we really truly need is to have that relationship with one another, to love one another, to create a family atmosphere. And it was just recently that my wife and we discovered how badly we need a family. See, as Alan has said, I've been in this role now for about 3.5 years. And prior to this, I pastored at Valley Christian Fellowship in Longview for 22 years. And when I resigned that position, my family and I decided to stay in the church, which is a really difficult thing. I mean, I'll just be honest with you. As the pastor, it's kind of difficult. And then for the new pastor coming in, and especially a pastor who's been there for 22 years, it's just a hard thing to, pastor the congregation, have everybody. But the reality is that I'm like never there. I could count I think in the last 3.5 years, I've been there maybe 5 times, right? So it's not like I'm there very often, but my family, they were involved in a lot of things. My kids, they were involved in ministry. My wife, she taught women's ministry. So they loved the church, and the church loved them. And then about 1.5 years ago, about 2 years ago, somewhere in there, we just really felt like the Lord was leaning on our heart that we needed to leave. We needed to go find another place. So we did. And we said goodbye to some loved ones and some friends and everything else, and we went on that search for a church. I've never looked for a church. Honestly, when I went to the first church that I went to when I was saved, I followed a girl to church, right? I got saved in that church. I got called to the ministry in that church. I was sent out as a missionary in that church, and then I became a pastor. So I've never looked for a church. And all of a sudden, I found myself in a position where we were looking for a church. And we found a church. We felt like God kind of led us to that place. The only thing is that it was at the end of 2019. Do you remember what happened shortly after that? 2020, right? COVID hit. And when COVID hit, everything changed. Everything was different. And church went to online. And here we are in a new church trying to make friends with new people, trying to build relationships, trying to have some sort of connection with folks, but yet we're incapable of doing that. There's just no way to be able to kind of connect with people, right? But we kind of thought that's okay. I mean, we're church people. I'm a pastor. This is what I do. We can make it. It's not a big deal. Until a month ago. See, a month ago, COVID hit our house. So the three of us that live in the house, all three of us got COVID. I think my son brought it home from work. And I had COVID early in 2020. And I got it for a second time, but it wasn't as bad. I think partly because I had it, and I think my immunity was up, and everything was okay, and I just kind of battled through this situation. My wife, she got it, and it was a little bit worse. She had about 4 or 5 days, and it was fever and aches and pains, and it wasn't very fun at all. But my son got hammered. 19-year-old son. Which is kind of unusual, right? We read all the stuff in the paper, and they say, young people aren't getting as bad. Well, now we're seeing that those numbers are going up. But at the time, it was kind of like, well, it's really not that big a deal. It'll be okay. But 19 years old, he ended up having a high fever, and then he got the sweats, and he got just everything that started. And then he started to breathe heavy, and he started to turn a little white. And I remember going in and checking on him and said, man, are you okay? And he's going, I'm fine, Dad, but he's had this hacking cough and everything else. And I have a daughter-in-law who's a nurse. And she said, Lance, why don't you go and get an oximeter and see if you can check his oxygen? So I ran and grabbed an oximeter. It was the last one on the shelf. And I came into the room and I put it on his finger, and it read it 81, which is not good. Not good. So I called Kaiser immediately and I said, hey, this is what's happening. This is the situation. They said, load him up, take him down to the emergency room right now. So we took him down to the emergency, or I took him down to the emergency room, pulled into the little place where you can kind of drop him off and things like that. And I took him in to the emergency room, and she says, well, we're met at the door because it's COVID time. Met at the door, and they're looking at me going, well, what are you doing here? And I said, well, my son, he's got COVID, and this is the situation, and he needs to come in, and we were told to come. She says, okay, we'll take him. You need to go back. And I said, what do you mean I have to go back? I mean, my son, he's 19. I understand he's like 6'2", but he's 7 to me, right? I mean, at this point, he's 7 years old, and I'm thinking, I can't just hand him over to you. He said, I'm sorry, this is the way it is. So they take him into the emergency room, and I go out into the parking lot, in the emergency room parking lot, and I'm just sitting there, and I'm praying and trying to keep my mind on positive things, which is really, really hard, because when you're in those situations, your mind automatically kind of goes to the worst of the worst, right? And then about 2 hours into it, we get a phone call. I get a phone call. I'm sitting out there, and they said, we're going to admit him. What do you mean you're going to admit him? No, you don't understand. We just brought him down to get some oxygen, and then we're going to take him home, right? No, we're going to admit him. He's pretty bad. What do you mean he's pretty bad? He's pretty bad. So I hung up the phone. I called my wife. Man, I just started to cry at that moment. I mean, all I could think was the worst of the worst, right? And my wife said, what's wrong? I have no idea what's going through her mind because I'm just crying. And I said, they've admitted him. Oh. And then she starts to cry. She says, are you coming home? I said, I can't even move right now. This was not what I was expecting to run into. This is not what I was expecting today, right? She says, why don't you come home? So I came home. About 2 hours later, they called us again because they'd moved him into the COVID floor. 2 hours later, they said, we're going to move him into ICU. And they upped his oxygen just to the point, just below where they were going to intubate. And in our minds, I mean, here we are, we're in quarantine, right? We're not mixing with other people. We are all by ourselves, and we've got this information, and our minds immediately go to the worst of the worst. As a matter of fact, we knew somebody who had lost their kid just that week in that ICU. So in our minds, we're thinking, oh man, this is it. And all there is silence. There's nobody calling us except for immediate family. I've got my kids calling me, and how's Jared doing? What's going on? Just silence. Now, part of that's our fault, or my fault at least. I didn't get on Facebook. If I'd have gone on Facebook and shared that with the world out there, I'd have got all kinds of phone calls, and people would have said, oh my goodness, what's going on? We're praying for Jared, and things like that. But we kind of pulled Facebook aside. And honestly, I just didn't think about it. We are in the midst of this crisis. And at one point, I looked over at my wife and I said, man, this sucks going through this with no church family. What you're doing here is a good thing. Don't step away and make it all about that Sunday morning thing. Make sure you build the family. But at the same time, we need to make sure that we are reaching the world around us, right? Hence the theme, shine. Every time I wrote shine, I wanted to do jazz hands. Anybody else think that, right? Shine, you just want to do jazz hands, right? Let others see Jesus in you. And the theme verse, right? Well, 2 verses is what I got here. So Philippians chapter 2, verse 15 to 16. This is Paul writing to the church in Philippi. He says, so that you may become blameless and pure. Now he's talking about, I'm asking you to do all of these things so that you may become blameless and pure, children of God, without fault, in a warped and crooked generation. Then you will shine among them like stars in the sky as you hold firmly the word of life. Then you will shine among them like stars in the sky. Have you ever been someplace where you can see the stars? I mean, not just some of the stars. I'm talking about you can see all of the stars, right? I mean, granted, we still don't get to see all of them, but in a place where you feel like, I have never seen this before. Just a couple of weeks ago, we were in Maui. Actually, we were in Maui with Alan and his family. We just didn't know we were in Maui. we did happen to see each other and kind of, hey, Alan, what are you doing? But we were in Maui. Lisa, my wife, and I, and then 3 of our kids. And we decided to do Haleakala and to go to the sunset tour. It was supposed to be the sunrise, but 3:30 was really early. Did you guys do the sunrise? Yeah, dude, I was not going to get up at 3:30. I told my kids, listen, if you want to go, that's fine. And they said, but Dad, you're the one on the rental car. I said, well, if you want to go, that's fine. I'm not going. I'm not sure how you're doing it. But so we went up to look at the sunset. And it was beautiful. It was amazing. Here we are. We're sitting on the edge of this kind of cliff area. And you're just watching the sun go down. And it's just so gorgeous. We're taking all these pictures. But if you stay, right? If you stay long enough beyond the time when everybody leaves, and there's maybe like a handful of people, 5 or 6 folks, and it gets totally dark up there, and then you look up, you will be greeted with one of the most beautiful things you have ever seen. And I've had opportunities to see that a couple of times, but I had no idea that my kids hadn't had the opportunity. I guess I should have known that, right? I mean, I'm their dad. I didn't take them anyplace. I'm the bad dad. I think that's what it really comes down to. So we're sitting there, we're looking up, and necks are all crazy. We got to the point where we laid down. You laid down on the sidewalk there and just stared at it. And my daughter, 23-year-old daughter, she says, Dad, this is amazing. I mean, you can see the Milky Way, right? It's incredible what you can see. I said, I know, sweetheart, isn't it so incredible? She said, no, Dad, you don't understand. This is life-changing. I said, what do you mean? She says, I've been asking God to help me to see Him, and to help me to feel small. That's a weird thing for a 23-year-old to ask, right? But she said, God, I just want to feel small. I want to see how great and grand you are. And here we are in this moment. We're seeing it. Now, the reason she had never done that before, because we live in Southwest Washington. And most of the time, you can't even see the sky anyhow, right? It's nothing but clouds. And then those moments when the clouds do part and you get a chance to see the sky, you don't get to see all of those stars. Though the stars are there, you don't get to see all of those stars. Why? Because there's this thing called light pollution. There's this man-made, manufactured light that goes up into the sky and it creates something to where you can't see all the stars even though they're there. But there are a few that you can see, right? You see, that's what the Apostle Paul is saying. That's exactly what he's saying. See, I think, now hear what I'm going to say, and I know that this may be a little bit of a stretch, but that's okay. I'm the one speaking, so I can do this. I think that in today's world, there's a lot of believers in Christ, a lot of people who have committed their lives to Jesus, but they're hiding what's going on inside of them, or they're so involved in the things of the world that they themselves are not allowing what's inside of them to shine forth. So there's all of these Christians amongst us, but because of the pollution, the world's pollution, we don't see that. When people look out into the world, there's a few bright spots here and there. But see, what the Apostle Paul does is he tells us that we are to shine like stars among a warped and crooked generation, to shine bright amongst the world's light manufacturing pollution. I didn't have that down, but I just thought of that. I think that works. And that word shine is phenomai. It means to become visible. Isn't that kind of cool? Paul says, listen, you've got it within you, but become visible. Allow it to become something that comes out of you. Make it known. Then the question comes up, because in my mind, I'm always thinking, okay, you want me to do this, but how? How do I do it? And he says, hold firmly to the word of light and of life. And the Greek word there, it's kind of a twofold word. It means hold on to, hold the word close to, follow the word, but also hold it out. Let's think about this for a moment. I think that the church today has really messed this up. Okay, let me say it two ways, because I have some dear friends. They're great pastor friends. They work so hard at trying to create something that God would be proud of, maybe you might say. I mean, Paul says, listen, I want you to do these things so that when I come to the end of my life, I know that I didn't run in vain. I mean, that's what he's saying, right? So I understand pastors are saying, listen, I want you to live this life. And we're so focused on making sure that everybody does right so that we stand out in the world, but we stand out in the world because we're not doing the wrong thing. But what we do is we've taken right, and now we argue against the wrong. And we aren't so quick to just do. But Paul said, no, hold to. In other words, live within the gospel. Live within the obedience of the world and allow it to change your life. But then take the same word that, now, hear what I'm about to say, because I think this is where we get it wrong. The same word that changed you, the mercy, the grace, the love. Take that same word. I'm telling you, I don't know very many people, and I know that there are some, and maybe you're in here today and you're going to hit me on the way out and say, hey, I just want you to know I'm one of those guys. But very few people came to know Jesus out of fear. We don't like to admit this, but we're already living in fear. Everybody that I know has some sort of insecurity, some sort of fear of being found out. Everyone. I don't care who you are. Jeff Bezos. You kind of look at these folks, you say, look, they're living high, but I'm telling you, but at night when they go and they lay their head down on the bed, they still have the same insecurities that you have. They still have the same questions that you have. So what Paul is saying is take the thing that you have discovered, the thing that drew you, the fact that you were unlovable, but yet you were loved. The fact that you were unworthy, and yet God gave it to you. The fact that you deserved, and yet God held back. Right? Take that. So hold to it, but then take it into the world so that the world may know. Eugene Peterson, in the Message, he says it this way. He says, carrying the light-giving message into the night. Carrying the light-giving message into the night. You know what? We can just close the Bibles and go home now, right? Right, that's enough. But here's the problem. And we misunderstand that, folks. And I don't know you personally. I don't. Maybe all of you live the life that you're supposed to live, and you love the way that you're supposed to love. But I see far too much on Facebook, and I see far too much in my interactions with other Christians. And people are sorry. Matter of fact, I preached at a place just this last week, and afterwards I had 2 people come up to me and tell me how wrong I was. And it wasn't necessarily in the theology, it was just the way that I presented what it is that I had to say. And how you need to make sure you're really clear on this, because we don't want people to mess up on this. And I keep thinking to myself, wow, is God not God? Can he not take care of this stuff? Can you not do those things? So I think the Apostle Paul, because if you take a look at this, and we've got this little blurb, shine like stars in the universe. Hold out it, as you hold out the word of life. And I think he takes this and he says, just in case you misunderstand what I'm asking you to do, I'm going to give you an example. Right? Because in verse 5 of chapter 2, what he says is, he says, in your relationships, have the mind of Christ. In your relationships, act like Jesus. That's what he's telling us to do. And then look at this. I love this because he goes a bit further and he explains. Because I know all of us kind of say, okay, so I'm supposed to act like Jesus. What was Jesus like? Who, being in the very nature God, did not consider equality with God something to be used to his own advantage. Rather, he made himself nothing by taking the very nature of a servant, being made in human likeness, and being found in the appearance as a man. He humbled himself and became obedient to death, even death on the cross. So Jesus, this is what the Apostle Paul, he says, Jesus is our example. And this weekend, this is because I was really wrestling with, okay, shine. And there's so many directions that we could have went, right? So many things that we could have, but I could have pulled out some science and kind of talked about all that. And I just really felt like God said, no. Point to Jesus. So this weekend, that's kind of what we're going to do. We're going to take a look at some events that happened in Jesus' life. I'm going to pull some of those things out. And I'm hoping that in the midst of that, you're all going to walk away and go, that's the way I'm supposed to be. That's what I'm supposed to do. Right? Now, what I want to do today, just real quick, and this will be really quick. I want to take a look at a prayer. This is found in John chapter 17. A lot of this stuff, that was kind of preliminary. I kind of laid that out for you. Now we're going to jump into that. So John chapter 17. This is what's called, has been called the high priestly prayer, right? This is Jesus' prayer. To me, this is the most amazing thing because Jesus, the Son of God, God in the bod, God walking amongst us, he prays this prayer and somebody's listening and somebody begins to write this out, right? They begin to say, oh, what does Jesus say? So they begin to write this out. And this is the place where Jesus prays for himself, he prays for his disciples, and then ultimately he prays for all believers. He prays for you and I, right? But what I'm going to do is I just want to look at the first five verses here. Look at this. John 17, first 5 verses. It says, when Jesus had spoken these words, he lifted up his eyes to heaven and said, Father, the hour has come. Glorify your Son, so that the Son may glorify you. Since you have given him authority over all flesh, to give eternal life to all whom you have given him. And this is eternal life, that they know you, the only true God, and Jesus Christ whom you have sent. I glorified you on earth, having accomplished the work that you gave me to do. And now, Father, glorify me in your own presence with the glory that I had with you before the world existed. You know what I love about Jesus? That he's able to cut through all of the pollution, all of the fakeness, all of the manufactured light, cut through all of the pollution and to navigate all of the distractions and stay on mission. This is so strange because we think we live with a lot of distractions, right? And especially the last 2 years, it has been so overwhelming. How can you stay focused? But could you imagine being Jesus in Palestine under Roman rule? Can you imagine just walking down the street and all of your fellow Jews and how they would feel and all of the conversations and all that? We think it's bad here, right? And yet it was so difficult. And Jesus stayed so focused. And not only did he stay focused, he stayed focused from a very early age. He knew, this is why I came. I gave somebody has Luke chapter 2, verses 48 and 49. Who has that? Luke chapter 2, verses, okay, go ahead.
So when they saw him, they were amazed. And his mother said to him, Son, why have you done this to us? Look, your father and I have sought you anxiously. And he said to them, Why did you seek me? Did you not know that I must be about my father's business?
Okay, so what is the setting? Someone help me out here. What's the setting?
The
The temple. Yes, and what's happening? He's around the other priests, and he is teaching them, right? And they're amazed. And what happened? Why was he there, and yet mom and dad didn't know?
It was a Passover, and they were leaving town.
Yeah, and they lost him, which makes me feel really good as a dad. Just want you to know, I've only lost one kid one time. It was a short amount of time, not 3 days, God. But do you see what I mean? See, at a very early age, Jesus knew, in the midst of all the distractions, this is why I'm here. This is what I'm supposed to do. And then, shortly after Jesus' public ministry begins, he goes back to his hometown. He goes into the synagogue. I love this because this is after there are some miracles and there's some moments and times where he's taught. And people are he's beginning to become more and more popular. And people are beginning to say, we want to have him come and speak. We want him over here. So he shows up in his hometown and the synagogues there and go, oh my goodness, Jesus is going to be here. They all think, we need to have Jesus bring the message. This is going to be great. So Jesus walks in the door. And they say, hey, Jesus, would you give the message today? Jesus walks forward and he picks up the scroll of Isaiah, right? And he opens it up. And he reads these words. Who has Luke chapter 4, verses 18 through 21? Okay.
The Spirit of the Lord is on me, because he has anointed me to proclaim good news to the poor. He has sent me to proclaim freedom for the prisoners and recovery of sight for the blind, to set the oppressed free, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor. Then he rolled up the scroll, gave it back to the attendant, and sat down. The eyes of everyone in the synagogue were fastened on him. He began by saying to them, today the scripture is fulfilled in your hearing.
Okay, so he came to preach the gospel to the poor, to heal the brokenhearted, to proclaim liberty to the captives, to recovery of sight to the blind, to set free those who are oppressed, and to proclaim the acceptable year of the Lord. This is why he came. And then, as he is in his ministry, and he's going about the things that he's supposed to be doing, right? You know, John the Baptist, he gets arrested. John the Baptist, he gets a little nervous. He begins to think, wait a second, I'm like Jesus' guy, and I'm sitting in a prison, right? So he sends a message to Jesus. He brings his guys in, and he says, hey, can you go and talk to Jesus, and can you ask him, are you the one? Are you really the one, right? Which in my mind, I always think to myself, how did that conversation even go? Because I think that at that point, his disciples, John's disciples, who were also Jesus' disciples, are looking at John and saying, wait, you're the one that told us to go after him. You're the one that, you want us to go to, ask what? Go ask him, is he the one? So he does. They do. They go and they say, are you the one? I think that's Luke chapter 7, verse 22. Who has that one?
So he replied to the messengers, go back and report to John what you have seen and heard. The blind receive sight, the lame walk. Those who have leprosy are cleansed, the deaf hear, the dead are raised, and the good news is proclaimed to the poor.
All right, so that's all part of the work that God had called him to do, right? Remember, we go back to John chapter 17. He says, Lord, Father, I have done the things that you have given me to do. And I love it because he says, I have glorified your name. And that word glorify, it's the word that we get our word doxology. It's doxa. And it literally means to bring light to or to reveal. See, isn't that kind of cool? Because the Apostle Paul tells us to shine, and yet Jesus said, and he points to Jesus, he says, do like Jesus did. And Jesus, at the end of his life, he prays and he says, listen, I have brought light to you. I have revealed your light. I have done the things that you've asked me to do. And then there's the point in time where two of his disciples come to Jesus and they ask him, hey, can we be your second-hand men? And Jesus says, man, you're not, you don't know what you're asking for. So Mark chapter 10, verse 45. Who has that one?
For even the Son of Man did not come here to be served, but to serve, and to give his life a ransom for many.
All right, so again, Jesus came to give his life away. And then, as Jesus was on his way to Jerusalem, and he meets up with a guy by the name of Zacchaeus, right? And when he meets with Zacchaeus, and Zacchaeus has this change of heart, and Zacchaeus says, listen, Lord, if I have offended anybody, or if I've taken more than I should take from anybody else, I'll pay it all back, right? But look at what Jesus says to Zacchaeus. Actually, he says it to anybody that will listen. Luke chapter 19, verse 10. Who has that one?
For the Son of Man has come to seek and to save that which was lost.
Okay. So his purpose was to come and to seek and to save. Then the last one I want to get. This is the place where Jesus is standing before Pilate. Now think about this for a moment, because especially in our time, in 2021, 2021, and so much angst towards the government. And here's Jesus standing before Pilate, the governor. What would you say to the governor if you could stand before the governor? Grumblings right here, right? I mean, well, let me get my list, right? So here's Jesus. He's standing before Pilate. And Pilate is angry with him. He's angry with him because he's not answering him. Pilate keeps asking questions, and Jesus won't answer. But not only is he angry because he won't answer, he won't even answer the accusations, right? So Pilate looks at him and says, do you not know? Do you not know that I have the power to take your life? I may have just read what somebody else has, but if I did, that's okay. Just stay with me here. Do you not realize that I have the power to either free you or to crucify you? And then look at what Jesus says. He says, you would have no power over me if it were not given to you from above. In other words, what he's saying is that I am here giving my life because I'm supposed to be here giving my life. See, John chapter 17, Jesus says, I have glorified you on earth. I have shined brightly. I have finished the work that you have given me to do. I have stayed the course. I didn't get caught up in all the pollution. I did what you wanted me to do. And that's not the end of the story, right? I mean, ultimately, he dies on the cross and he says it is finished, which to me, it kind of closes the book on the fact that I did what it is you've asked me to do. But then 3 days later, he's resurrected. And then he meets with his church. Right? And he looks at his church and he says, as the Father has sent me, so send I you. And we'll talk about that on Sunday, but basically what he's saying is that your mission now, what Paul is telling us, to shine, your mission is connected to my mission. What you're to do is what it is that I have already done. Do you see that? See, I know, man, I wrestled, do I give you 10 things that you need to do to shine? What's that going to look like? All of that sort of, give you some homework. But the reality is that what we need to do is to look at Jesus and to see, oh my goodness, who being in the very form God, that word morphe literally means the ingredients of God, being in the form of God, did not regard equality with God as something to be grasped. See, Jesus wouldn't walk off after he did 4 and go, yeah, I did that. So here's what I want to leave you with here tonight. I want you to think, what are some ways that I can shine? Maybe this weekend. What are some things you can, in my mind, I've got all kinds of things. But I want you to think, what are some things that you can do that would help other people to see the humility in you, to help other people see the love in you, the mercy in you, the grace in you? What is it that you could do to make sure that you not only live the word, but you hold it forth? So I'm going to ask you to do this. Let me pray. Heavenly Father, thank you. Thank you for tonight. Thank you for the opportunity to be here. Thank you, God, for your word. And Lord, I pray, oh God, please, I ask that you would help us. Lord, I think of the Apostle Paul and how he writes and how he calls the Philippians. He calls us to shine like stars in the midst of a dark, dark generation. God, that's impossible if we get caught up in all the things of the world. But it is so different when we act like Jesus. When we come to give our life away, when we come to serve. So God, help us to do that. For Lord, I ask this in your precious and holy name.